Hello, Tom here. Just before we get started, I want to say thank you to Ash Clivery, who produced this wonderful episode. It's a conversation with one of my favourite musicians, producers, composers, Amon Tobin.
Yo, Tbone, did you produce this?
Sounds good, right?
I have no idea what somebody on the receiving end of all of this goes through, or if it's just casual, or if they even register, but I know that for me, it's so much about a process. It keeps me feeling like there's a sort of a purpose and a structure where there isn't one. It's my love, you know, that's what it is. So in the end, what comes out, I hope it's good, but what it's really done for me is it's given me all that meaning. It's given me a sort of like a vessel to pour all of the things that I have inside instead of just throwing it in the sea or whatever. At least on a very selfish level, which is the way I operate, it's really self-serving, my whole thing. I had a break from putting stuff out. I didn't really have a break from making stuff, because when I left Ninja, what I wanted to do was make all these different aliases. And I was really aware that if I just sort of started putting stuff out under different names, it would seem very kind of half-baked and casual. I wanted these things to be really well developed, not like casual, incidental flirtations. I wanted them to be really well grounded things that had gone through some different stages of development before I released them. And that, of course, took time. Like Figurative, for example, which is like like electronic music through a sort of folk lens, right? If I'd done that for a couple of tunes and then kind of gone, well, I don't see there's much mileage in this, then I could have done that in private rather than releasing it with the promise of more to come. So now, at least, like there's that incubation period where I got to sort of figure out, do I really love this enough to really flesh it out, really dive in? And if so, then I can put it out. You can play God in your own little universe. You are the creator of your own little universe, however insignificant that might be. That's what we all do when we make stuff. I think when we're creative, that word is really stinging me lately, but mainly because YouTubers have all decided to call themselves creatives, and it's just sticking in my throat. I think when we're trying to be creative, we're trying to make something, which by, I guess, some loose definition feels like, you know, who are you then? You're the creator, right? You hold influence over it and can shape it and understand its properties so that you can manipulate it and make it take the form that you imagine. When I make stuff, I'm often trying to understand the world around me and interpret a version of it that makes sense to me. Because if I'm synthesizing something, what I'm normally doing is trying to break down what physical elements actually exist in the natural world into a way that I can then somehow approximate it through synthesis. Because to synthesize something, you have to have an understanding of how it's made, right? Like if you're synthesizing a drum, you have to understand what a skin is, what a resonant body is, what surface tension is, you know, all of these things. So by doing that, you kind of learn about the natural world as you're trying to synthesize it. But then, of course, you don't stop there. The idea isn't to recreate what's already outside, because just fucking go outside. You know, the idea is to make it do things that are very unnatural and peculiar and fascinating. I kind of really appreciate what could you call it, intention, right? That's what distinguishes something from being, I guess, art from just pissing about. Having something that you meant to do, and whether or not you managed to do it, or how closely realized it was in the end is something else. I can't stand the idea of noodling, right? Or just like haphazarding things. There's a sort of jam band culture in America, I think left over from the Grateful Dead days. And I'm like, where's the structure? And I guess I just need that. There's a sketch from some comedy thing. I think it was Sarah Silverman, and she kept being invited to some jam band thing, and they'd be like, oh, this is great, come, it's the best thing ever. And she'd go, and it was just what is even happening? This is boring as fuck. And then she just took all these drugs and went and was like, this is the best fucking thing I've ever heard, right? Anyway, man, yeah, no judgment. I do like indulgence too. So when it comes to making tracks, I start out with a very, very rigid idea of what I want to do, right? I sketch it out in a sort of a form, and I try and get as close as I can to that. There was an album I made called ISAM, where it was a very, very sort of technical album, and what I did was I stuck rigidly to my intention, and I was very unbending about it and very sort of stubborn about it, and there was a big sense of satisfaction when I could get there. The downside to it, there was a sort of a lack of spontaneity. It sort of choked out the happy accident thing entirely from the process. And so what I've tried to do more recently is introduce structure in a sketch form. So let's say you're building a house, but I haven't rendered in all the shades of all the walls and the exact type of glass. I have the shape of it and I know what it needs to look like. But if while I'm building it, I find a new material that's I've never seen before, or that maybe functions better or is more interesting, I'll use that. So within that structure, I'm allowing myself lots of room for play and lots of room for discovery and accidental things to happen. And I feel like that's a better balance in the end, because otherwise it's not interesting to me. I know people would listen to some of my shit and go, there's no structure at all, but there really is. My most abstract stuff is born out of a structure. And so the most abstract textural, incoherent melodies you might hear from me are at least done on purpose. Someone could listen to something off How Do You Live, or actually more like Fear and a Handful of Dust, which is an album I made a few years back, which has a lot of melody in there, but you have to dig. And the thing is, like, I can imagine someone listening to something from there and just being like, well, this is all texture and there's no melody in it, although I'd argue them and I'd fight them. But I think there are songs and projects, I think, which are more focused on, like Figurative, for example, was like born of driving around listening to a lot of Mexican harmonies, right? Like Mexican folk radio, which of course here in California I get a lot of, and I was really locked into their harmonies and the things that they did melodically. Not that this is what Figaro is, but it did inform it, because I was really trying to learn about harmony. Because I'd never really done that before. It's a lot harder and more rewarding to do something like that and come close to pulling it off. I think the approach to technology people tend to have is wrong. People approach technology as a convenience tool that makes what they did already easier to do, rather than a sort of platform from which to reach even further. I can drive a car and I can get to the same place I walked to yesterday 4 times as fast, but why not just drive it somewhere else? And I really think that's how people, like, look, it's all sold like that as well. It's all a convenience tool. Like, it's so easy now to do this. Oh, it's so easy to do that. Yes, it is fucking easy. So don't do that. I remember like in the 90s making stuff, and there'd be like plugins coming out that are like, yeah, you can sound just like Square Pusher with this plugin. And I'd be like, yeah, sure you can, but don't do that. Do you know what I mean? To make this plugin do something else. I feel like that's such a sad way to look at the world, like just trying to get to the end of result as quickly as possible. It's like we're all rushing to our death. Like, oh my God, how can I make this as efficient as possible? As though there's a product that we're making that's somehow necessary. Look at the way plugins are designed. Half of them look like you're controlling a nuclear submarine or something. I think it's designed to make you feel like you're doing something vital when actually you're really just having fun most of the time. I mean, I mostly use analog equipment. I feel like there's a romance with it that kind of eclipses the nerdiness of it. Like, look, I have synthesizers here that you could get a plug-in for a fraction of the price and they'd sound indistinguishable. But going back to my sort of self-serving, you know, my experience while I'm making this music is so enriched by interacting with this thing and by its physical contact and, you know, and all of the things that it makes me feel. That maybe even translates into the music. I hope that it does, but what's for sure is I feel more rewarded by the process while I'm interacting with it. And I think that has value. It's like I say, it's not really about the product. My main enemy is just outside interference. I just need to sort of forget where I am and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and that takes some time to sort of get into, you know, especially now that I'm not smoking weed anymore. People do different drugs to get into that sort of mode, and so that takes me longer to sort of transition from paying my bills and doing grown-up shit to doing something that really doesn't have its feet in the world. And every time I get an email or a phone call or someone shows up at the door or whatever the fuck, that's, you know, it's gone, and then you have to spend a bit more time then going in. And what you end up doing is working at night because, of course, nobody is calling you in the middle of the night. But that's really unhealthy. So, you know what I mean? It's just like normal shit that anybody who does anything kind of encounters. It's funny to me that I sort of resent the outside world for just being there and having to like eat and do normal stuff and interact with people like it's some kind of a, you know, a fucking rude interjection when it's just actually what you should be doing. So anyway, I find that ridiculous, but it is ridiculous. This whole thing is ridiculous. We might be expanding into releasing new artists this year, which is kind of cool because I've wanted that from the get-go. I wanted Nomark to be more than just a vehicle for my own aliases. It took time to get to a point where we felt comfortable doing that. That looks like it might be on the cards this year. I'm also learning a lot of stuff that's sort of adjacent to synthesis, all to do with physics simulation. I'm trying to make videos for all my tracks, And if you go to my YouTube channel, you can see, I guess, my learning curve in real time as I make like really rubbish derivative 3D stuff, hopefully getting better over time. It's physics simulation, and it's fucking amazing. So using Houdini, Unreal Engine, it's like a project so I can learn how to do it.
My thanks to Amon Tobin for speaking with us. Thanks to Ash Clivery, who produced, mixed and sound designed this episode. Check him out online. You'll find him as Producer Ashley in most places. And if you enjoyed this episode, then please consider writing us a review, liking the show, subscribing. It really does help people to find us, and more people are finding this show, which is just so rewarding. Another way you can say thanks is to go to Tbone Productions and buy some of our fantastic Sounds Good Right merch. We've got hoodies, mugs, t-shirts, and if there's a sound designer in your life, then we have some stuff for them as well. So go check that out. And as always, thanks for listening.
Yo, Tbone, did you produce this?
Sounds good, right?